All right, hey everybody. Hope you're having a wonderful whatever day this gets uploaded. Today I'm going to be doing a kind of a different mixing with Swigs because it's actually mastering with Swigs. Yeah, mastering. Now I made this video specifically because I've been getting a lot of questions about, how do I take my song from I think it's done to whatever this mastering thing is. And the honest truth is what I'm going to show you is nothing compared to what goes on in a big studio, of course, but the principle is the same. Mastering is the final stage that brings your song to be listenable in all sorts of places, headphones, car speakers, on the radio, on someone's laptop computer, and it involves a few steps that can be really critical. Now, when you're looking at an entire album, of course, you'll be working with multiple songs and looking at the volume differences and trying to make the listening experience very uniform. It's not like one song is going to sound super loud and then the next one's really quiet and compressed, and you want this uniformity. So what I have today is a cover of the brand new Civilization 6 games, France Atomic Era music, which is performed by SubversiveAsset, an awesome friend of mine who makes very unique covers, while the song itself, which I'll let you guys hear in a sec, is primarily performed in, I guess jazz is a good bubble term for it. It's something very unique. He performs on saxophone and arranges with different instruments, but he tells a story in each song, and it's very cool to see that. And as a result, the arrangement as a whole takes on this very unique sound, and it's very distinguished. I can tell it's by him each time. Now, what I think is cool about mastering his is that it's not a rock song, so it's going to be out of my comfort zone. So it might, help relate for those of you guys watching who are like, I don't know how to master this song. I've never used this kind of instrument before. So let's just take a listen. So you can tell there's like some really good dynamics here. We have more saxophones enter. Just for sake of time, I want to show you where we get the loudest spikes, of course. We have piano. One thing to keep in mind is how are these, different, how is the frequency range of this song? Are there a lot of trebly instruments, a lot of bassy instruments? And right now, I'm already visualizing there's a lot of saxes in the center and a lot of bass also in the center. So I really want those saxophones to sound a little brighter in our final, final song and have this clear-cut distinction, making up words. So, instead of having it feel too cluttered, like right here. So you have this really cool strident melody going on. I really like that. So I want that to stay. These crashes are coming down very hard though. So one thing I have to always kind of go back on is, when mixing and then mastering, of course, you can't, my golden rule is you can't polish a turd, which means don't spend too much time trying to add finishing touches on something where you'd rather change the insides. And 1 second, my Pikachu is falling down on my speaker. But for the sake of having this wave file here, or whenever I do mastering for another band or artist or whatever, one thing I always try to keep in mind is I'm not going to be able to spend too much time fixing small things I don't like. Rather, I want to bring out the best of the song. So the first thing I put in a mastering chain is an EQ, and I'm going to use re-EQ again because I want this tutorial to be very intuitive to anybody watching. Normally I would use FabFilter Pro Q, but see here we have, let me see if I can, I wish I could keep the image there for a second. Basically, we have a lot of these bass frequencies building up, and we don't want that to overpower the song, so one thing, normally I would just slap on something like this, which is just boosting the low and the high end, but I feel like we're gonna have some bad times here, so I'm gonna reduce this high shelf actually quite a bit. Let me explain what's going on in this chain. And if you've ever seen my mastering or mixing with Swigs series, you'll know that I am usually a fan of doing the same as much as possible, but basically what we have here is you have a high pass which cuts off the low end, and I'm cutting off around 33. There's not a very, very deep bass being performed here or sampled here, so what I find to best here is the bass stands out when it has its fundamental lowest note performed, which is probably going to be above 33C, or the C1, which I love about Reaper EQ. It'll tell you which note is here, so we're not hitting some crazy low C, so we can keep that. And one thing we can also have is a low shelf to pronounce the bass just a little bit, but because it's already so pronounced, like, let's listen to the bassier parts. So it's not doing a lot of greatness for us. So now on the high end, of course, let me turn off this. So this is called a low shelf, and that's a high pass. Feel free to steal the numbers here because that's basically what I did. And then experiment, of course. Your song's not going to work with someone else's settings note for note. So this is a high shelf, so it raises up the high frequencies to some degree, all of them. So let's listen before and after. See, this is where I'm scared. What was that? You don't want crazy boosting going on. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a band here, and I'm gonna reduce the band width, so it's like this surgical tool to go in and slice out a little bit of that cymbal. So we just, I'm trying to remove the harshness but not kill the tone of it. To be a little more acceptable. And then if we go to our high shelf here, we're able to get away with the boost. And again, what this boost does is it'll take these high-pitched instruments we have, like the saxophone's harmonic content, especially because I think these are tenor saxes. I'm probably wrong. I'm not a saxologist, but the idea here is know where your instruments sit in the mixture. And if I have an electric guitar, it's going to sit from here to like here. So we have, and vocals, they're going to sit in all different ways. Sometimes you have to have these little compromises to get away with the sound that you want. So I'm trying to bring out the melodic content of the saxes, and I find that using a high shelf is going to get me there. So let's take a listen to. sounded... Now, I don't know if that was intentional, but... So I'm just gonna help fade that. And one thing, normally you shouldn't give a mastering engineer fades or something. Apparently that's one thing, but... I'm just gonna leave that extra stuff in there. Alright, so the bottom line of this equalization is try to bring out a little bit of the fundamental bass notes here, but don't make anything boomy. See if there's any frequencies I'm not in love with, like that cymbal crash, and then carefully tweak it down and elevate the notes and instruments and the area that I want to stand out, and having some of the highs here really helps. Now, do not do this if you have a very treble heavy mix, because it will sound very harsh and bad to the ears. So the bottom line with this EQ is we're not gonna fix a track or anything. It's already supposed to sound fantastic, and I really do think that this is a pretty balanced mix that we get to work with here. So when you're looking at your own, if you ever think to yourself, man, this still doesn't sound like this song I'm referencing, and always listen to other music. It might feel like you're stealing, or if you want to be original and not borrow, but if you don't want to listen to anyone else's music and then you know, put out music for people to listen to, it's a little ironic. So, you know, feel free to listen to tracks you like, maybe even tracks you don't like. See if you prefer your mix to theirs, and figure out why, you know, and that way you can figure out what choices worked and what didn't. So now that we have this, I'm going to add a multi-band compressor, and, you know, eventually I'm going to stop telling what these things are, but it's a tutorial. So a multi-band compressor is just a compressor, which is a device used to control volume, but it controls different frequency bands, or like sections, so you can control, you know, the bass frequencies differently than the other ones. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is turn off auto makeup gain, because what this does is, so a compressor will, this is what a compressor is. When the volume goes up to a certain point, which is your threshold, so hey, this is getting too loud, let's only let in 1 decibel of volume for every 2 decibels of volume that it's trying to get in here. So the more tight a ratio, you know, the less likely someone's going to get in. It's going to need more and more volume to justify getting louder. So it's like a wall, but there's a little gate. Anyway, so I'm going to take off auto makeup gain, and we're just going to listen to the bass just to get an idea. So our volume is sitting kind of here. So as I reduce our threshold here, you can see this little number pop up. That's called gain reduction. That's how much volume we're losing as a result of the compressor, because it's not letting in that much volume. You know, it's only letting in these little guys. So I'm gonna start with, like, because this is a, you know, jazz piece, I'm not trying to crush it or anything. I'm gonna keep it here and see how it sounds in the mix. We have piano. Piano is one of the most annoying instruments I find to mix. Now, if I were to describe it in adjectives, what I'm trying to do right now, I'm going for control in the bass end, but I want it to be present all the time. I want it to be a little punchy. So as a result, you know, you don't necessarily want to compress and kill these highs. So another way of looking at compression could be here. Let's use this video to teach a little bit. So in the compression, you see how it's quiet here, then it raises up, and then it's quiet here, then it raises up. This is called a peak. That's like the tippity tip. Now, if we added a compressor here, and I'm just gonna solo this track out, and I'm gonna make you guys go crazy, so I'm gonna loop it. So if I put the threshold here and a really tight ratio, it's kind of like we're cramming this lid on the volume and saying, hey, you can't go that loud. So listen to it now. See this red? That's the gain reduction. We're telling it that you can't have this much volume. And as I lift it, the volume is allowed to go higher before I tell it to stop, right? So, and these controls are also the speed at which we'll start acting. So if I lower the attack, it might take a while. And then if I speed up the release, it'll sound all pumpy because it's taking a while, and then boom, compressed. So let's go back to factory default. Let's raise the ratio really high, just like a joke level. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to freeze the track, or rather render it down. Oh, I guess we're not allowed to do that. Okay, lesson's not going to work because I'm recording with Reaper my vocal thing. But basically what's going to happen is, let's just hit the button normalize. It's going to look like that, but flatter, like a rectangle. If you've ever heard anything about the loudness wars or any of these discussions, essentially what's happening here, and I'm just going to fix the track now. Essentially what happens in a lot of popular music now is people just compress really tight and make the volume very loud, and as a result the waves look like a giant brick because it's really loud and it's really flat. There's no dynamics. It doesn't get louder and quieter. It just gets and stays very loud. And the very basis of music is a combination of notes and rests. So, you know, you need these rests. You need it to get loud and quiet again. That's the beauty of dynamics. And I know that was a huge detour, but I know my audience, you know, many of you guys are still working just as I am to figure out this, you know, mystical world of mixing. Anyway, so our multi-band compressor, and this is the bass one. Now you might wonder, where do I put these? I'm putting it in between very obvious sections. So if I solo this, I only want to capture the bass, stand-up bass, and the piano and synth. Maybe a little bit of the low end of the sax is cutting through, but that's okay. Now let's take a listen to the next band. This is the mids, and usually there's going to be quite a lot of body in here, so I don't like to compress it too much either. So that's barely compressed, but we're not getting too loud in that area, you know? And what I'm really, really aiming for here is control, but space to breathe. So I'm not always compressing, and as a result, our music doesn't sound crushed. See, this is crushed. I hope the difference was obvious. Even a little. This is the upper mid control, and this is very, very crucial because this is basically what's keeping our tone almost. So I want to get to something quiet. Always, always, always compress and check your loudest and your quietest parts of the song especially. See that big crash here? Sorry. That crash is going to get affected by what we're doing with the compressor, and it's going to get compressed. It's gotta happen. See, it's not something I like to do is have in mind how far the compressors, the bands are to one another, so that it's a little uniform. never getting touched, which I like. I don't want the sound of compression. I want the sound of a controlled, I gotta stop saving, a controlled environment, and it's just absolutely important to me that I don't destroy the song just because, you know, a preset told me to. And that's why I really advocate against presets for mastering kind of plugins. And soon we'll get this guy in, I promise. Now I want you to listen to these two solid also to get a feel of what we're compressing. See, that band itself is containing all these like beep 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 sounds, and you're getting all the sax in it, you're getting like the snare hits, you're getting all this high-end stuff, and it can get tiring on the ears, so you don't want to, you want to have it breathe, I guess, or I should say I want to have it breathe, and that's why I'm doing it this way, where it only gets compressed when we really need to. I would do the same thing in a progressive metal mix too. Forgive me for saving all the time, that's just a good habit to get into. This thing is just gonna get like the noise, so I'm putting it in that little divot, and when that cymbal hits I want it compressed, so we're gonna keep this ratio a little higher, because, you know, I don't want that thing to get loud. So see, that's like not even that much volume loss, so let's take a listen to it. And just to inflate my ego and make sure I didn't ruin it, let's listen to it before. You know, it feels a little bit the same, but now I have a pronounced bass area. Let's listen to the beginning. See, it's beautiful. It's not getting compressed in the, you know, I like to think of this as the vocals almost, and a very angry singer will yell at you if you make the vocals sound really pushed down, and you know, they don't rise. Especially in this context. Of course, if you're making a pop song, you know, do whatever. And everything I'm saying is just justifying my decisions here, you know. It goes without saying, but I have to say it, you know, this isn't the way to mix for everybody. I'm really trying to give off an idea of what I do and maybe what you could do. And again, all these plugins are free, so. So the next thing I would like to do is introduce Ferric TDS. Now, I actually have not used this one, I just read about it, because it's a freeware version of what's called a tape saturator. And what a tape saturator plugin does is it essentially creates, you know, digitally, harmonic content and just like this warm, rich sound that fills in the cracks that digital programming might leave in. I would suggest using this on so many things, but you know, don't go overboard or you'll just have static. So let's play around. The saturation obviously is going to sit after our compression, so I'm going to try to be light. So it might not be obvious what I'm doing yet. So basically, and you know what? Let's make this a little more science experimenty. Let's... I spelled something wrong. So what I'm going to do is take out our EQ, good old EQ, and put it afterwards, and I'm going to pin that. And what we're going to do is observe what happens to the mix as I crank everything. Alright, so it looks normal. So as I increase the dynamics knob, you're going to notice the volume in general is getting a little higher, but the mix is also sounding a little bit warmer. Now this and this, and even a little bit of the recovery, it's kind of working in its way to influence the style of, you know, the actual tape saturation itself. So you know, these are things to fiddle around with and see how it affects the mix itself, because this is such a like slow intro and we have a lot of space to play with. So the slower it is, I think it might feel a little more transparent. Now, what I'm going to do is keep this dynamics knob a little low, and I'm going to increase the saturation. Plugin I'm finding is a little subtle about how it's performing the tape saturation here, because you know, before and after I'm only hearing very subtle differences. So I can crank it a little. This is working for me in two ways. One thing, it's adding a little bit of color, as they call it. You know, we're getting a brighter mix. There's a little bit of warmth. I feel like I'm listening to a track like that's been produced, but not so stale. So this extra EQ is just serving as a way to see what we're doing here. But I would definitely recommend getting this because it's free. And you know, never say no to free plugin. I think the best thing is going from turning off this master. Things felt a little disconnected, and through our efforts, we have combined a lot of these. Do is cheat with a paid plugin, and the reason why is just because I think it's important to see what I would do to solve something like this. So we have on the left side, so I'm going to create a left node. Where is the stereo placement left? And there's a few ways you could do this otherwise, but essentially what I want to do is reduce that crash that comes in right here. So that's making me sleep a little better. So what I did there was I just took an EQ bell node and I searched for the frequency on the left side where that cymbal felt a little loud, and I reduced it. Now, obviously, if you have the mix, I would suggest reducing it there. But if I was given the wave and had to master it, that's what I would do. So the reason why this works is also because there's only a cymbal on the left side. There's not a lot of instruments there that will suffer from what I've done. You know, there's not like a lot of bass piano notes, assuming the piano is placed stereo. Most of the content is very centered. So, and I'm gonna lower my volume for this. So now that we have our song, take a good break. Of course, this is a video, so I'm not depicting what really goes on, but you absolutely should give your ears a break. don't listen to any music or listen to some other music. Check out some similar tracks, reference tracks, see if you like yours, blah, blah, blah. Make sure you're in love with the tune, of course, before even going into mastering. But finally, what we do is we're going to use a limiter, and I have quite a lot of freeware choices here. So I'm just gonna, let's see if I can use the MDA one. MDA is a free plugin I really enjoy. Now, there's a few things to understand here, and one of them is the perception of volume. Basically, how loud something is a very relative term. And while we use a few different measurements like decibels or decibels FS, I think that's called full scale, there's kind of an understanding that around -2 or -3 decibels below 0, which is the point at which the song cannot be replicated without introducing distortion and artifacts, I tend to put mine around there. And what this does is basically it's going to boost the volume and then really cut it off like a compressor at that point so it doesn't clip. But because it's such a dynamic song, we have to be really careful. So I'm watching this meter mostly. In fact, let's try to make it a little bigger. Be able to listen to it without ever feeling the need to touch a volume knob. So I'm not even messing around with this knee because I know it needs to be a pretty hard knee, which is basically just like how hard you're gonna make sure it stays down, because I do not want clipping, and obviously you saw it clip anyway. So at a comfortable volume level, I'm able to hear it pretty well right now. See if I can refresh this a little faster. So, I'm actually gonna leave that tail end a little bit because it's also cut off anyway. Now, this is essentially it, and I'm using Audio-Technica M50X headphones right now, but I also have a pair of small studio monitors. They're the Mackie MK5s. Okay, they're not small. And they're, I want to say still like in the starter zone, I guess, but for an amateur producer, they costed around $300 US altogether, a little cheaper because they were like B stock, which is also how I got my Axe effects a little cheaper. I highly recommend having some speakers to reference, even if they're crappy, desktop speakers and they're going to be curved. Use them as a reference, meaning, okay, when the average person listens to this, what parts of my song are they going to hear the most? I really enjoy listening in my car because I have a, decent, stock stereo, whatever. So it'll sound like most cars, So it's a good reference. Or my phone, I'll just listen through mono. One thing you can tell with mono is how good the levels are for the instruments. So everything is very distinguished there. The saxes, the bass, and that's one of my favorite things about this piece, actually. It's, it's mixed to the point where we have a very clear idea of what's in the song, and there's not too many colliding instruments. It's not like there's 5 bass guitars or a whole section of brass instruments to distinguish from. So now all I have to do is, I can't render, of course, because I'm recording with my voice. But I'm going to play out the song just like I did for the last mixing with Swigs. But leave a comment if you have some ideas on mastering or questions about this one. And, massive thanks to SubversiveAsset for providing a song. He's a fantastic musician and a historian based on the last video. So please check out the original video and check out SubversiveAsset. Go subscribe if you haven't. He's also on GameLark and makes some really cool songs for there. And for those of you guys listening, I, only reach out once in a while to the public for mixing with Swigs. But if you're interested in having me produce one of your newer songs, check out my patreon.com/swigglesrp. I'm happy to mix a one-time, sort of song, and I'll even record it on here so you can see what I did. And then you can do it yourself. And then you'll never have to, pay someone else to mix for you. So I really hope this was fun to watch. I really hope you guys get a good grip of mastering and kind of the ideas behind it. And happy mixing mastering.